we have made it unsafe to be not white, not Christian, or not doing or not doing religion in the public square in a specific way. So if we don't understand that these stories are contributing to us being scared of people who are different from us, scared of people who are racialized or who do religion in a way that we are trained to think is wrong, even if we're not really sure why, people die and abuse keeps happening.
One of the central points of your book, you make this really interesting argument that the way we deal with abuse in this country is mediated by racism and white supremacy.
The really short version is we as a country tell ourselves these stories about white American women being imperiled, right, by swarthy religious outsiders who use our commitment to religious freedom against us because they want to take our women, right? So I'm looking specifically at books like Not Without My Daughter, for example, where Betty Mahmoudi, who is a real lady, a real white lady from Michigan, marries an Iranian man. And they have a beautiful, storybook life until he wants to return to Iran to visit his family after the revolution. And she uses the language of reverts. He reverts back to this violent, and she uses really animalistic language. And all of the entire book just does this. He's an animal. Muslims are animals. Iranians are animals. They hate women. This is what they do to women. And by this, I mean abuse and beat and rape women. But the challenging part is that, like, Betty Mahmoudi is a real lady. She says that her husband abused her as a feminist and as a person on this planet. I want to take that story seriously. That's important. Abuse happened in that relationship. At the same time, this story about one woman's abusive relationship gets extrapolated into, well, this is why we're right to be afraid of Muslims, and particularly Muslim men. This is why it is okay and in fact important for us to surveil, regulate, bomb Muslim majority countries. And so you get the one story extrapolated into really international policy in violent ways that also make less space for religious difference in the world and in this country, right? It dehumanizes others, minoritizes Muslims in the United States, despite the fact that there have been Muslims in the United States since before there was a United States.
So why is it a problem for us to pay attention to that? Shouldn't we be paying attention to all stories of abuse?
Yes, 100%. We should absolutely be paying attention to all stories of abuse. Here's the thing. Religion does not cause abuse. Race does not cause abuse. We see abuse literally everywhere there are people. That's not good news, obviously. The problem is we go, all right, this story proves to me that Muslim men are abusive, and the problem is Islam. The abuse comes from Islam. Islam is an inherently abusive religion, these stories tell us. Or in the case of Mormon fundamentalists in Texas, the state of Texas said, you practice polygamy because religion. Polygamy is inherently abusive. You do polygamy because religion. The problem is religion. We need to get these kids and these women out of this religious community. And so rather than address the real systemic crisis that is the abuse of women and children and say that's on all of us, that's an everybody problem, that's an American problem, what we want to do is say, you're doing religion wrong, you're doing sex wrong, and that's what's wrong, that's why you're getting abused. And so it's another way of honestly victim blaming, but it also doesn't fix abuse. Showing up with tanks in the front lawn of a community that's been expecting for truly generations the government to show up and take their kids, government shows up with a tank, takes your kids. This does not make abuse stop happening. It means minority religious communities trust the state even less. It means that there's no place to go if you do need to get out. Because if this is the only community you've ever known and the only other option you think you have is a state that's going to take your kids, where do you go? Mormon fundamentalists, who are phenotypically about as white as they come, start being described in language that we use toward Muslims. A reporter on Anderson Cooper actually referred to the FLDS, a Mormon fundamentalist sect, as the American Taliban. They talked about the modest clothing that these women wear, like burqas, and it is fascinating to watch the racialization of super pale people because they're doing religion differently.
On the one hand, we want to keep ourselves distant, And so we first pay attention to abuse when it happens in other communities, and we racialize it and say, those are the perpetrators, those are the bad guys. And then when we actually look within white communities,
and we're forced to.
And when we're forced to, and we have to acknowledge that abuse is a problem, then what? We overly emphasize and overvalue the white experiences and neglect people of color's experience when they're victims of abuse.
Absolutely. Well, and so, yeah, the Catholic sex abuse example it's where my book ends, and it's because it gets to be more complicated in like a media narrative. So if you're looking at Mormon fundamentalists, if you're looking at American Muslims, the move is, you do this religion, that religion is wrong, you're doing it wrong. And I know, because I know what religion is, because it looks like mainstream white Christianity. And so the reason that abuse is happening is because you did religion wrong, right? Catholicism, because it is the largest chunk of Christians in the United States, gets treated as a legitimate religion despite the fact that abuse is happening, right? You do have some folks from the outside saying, yes, Catholicism, but also hashtag not all Catholics, right? You do not have members of a Catholic congregation being all charged as sex abusers because they allowed their kids to go to that church, which is actually what we see with the FLDS community in Texas that I'm looking at.
What's the danger of not understanding this?
Okay. I mean, people die. Abuse keeps happening, and we make it harder and harder for people to be different from each other safely. Again, we know that folks who are the most visibly religious are also folks who are racialized and are most in danger of facing physical violence, verbal harassment. We have made it unsafe to be not white, not Christian, or not doing or not doing religion in the public square in a specific way. So if we don't understand that these stories are contributing to us being scared of people who are different from us, scared of people who are racialized or who do religion in a way that we are trained to think is wrong, even if we're not really sure why, people die and abuse keeps happening.